Fine. Our next topic is about XML Schema Definition. So what is this XML Schema Definition? This is none other than a new standard which is created exclusively only for XML document. So in our earlier videos we saw about DTD. DTD stands for Document Type Definition. It is used to provide the structure for creating an XML document. So here XML Schema Definition, that is XSD, also used to create a structure for an XML document. So what is the difference between DTD and XSD? The main difference is DTD is based on SGML, but XSD is purely based on XML. So that if we use XSD document structure, it will be very easy for the users to understand. Not only that, the standard for describing the structure for XML document in XML is known as XML Schema Definition. This is the definition for XSD. And XSD appear in the document just like DTD. I just know I said that. But since it is created purely using XML, so in DTD we saw certain syntax which will not be followed in XSD. XSD is purely different when compared to DTD. And this XSD also specifies the order of the child elements in which they should appear. So DTD also held that. So XSD will also use that particular thing. And in XSD the main point is it defines some data types to be used in the XML document. But in DTD we don't have that facility. So how to create the XSD definition? So XSD is created by using the schema element. So remember, you have to specify the schema tag in order to create an XSD structure. The namespace declaration must be made to the reference the elements and attributes that are used within the scope of the XML document. So it means that earlier video we saw about namespace. In namespace, why we use namespace? In order to avoid the name conflicts. Here in XSD also, in order to avoid the name conflicts, we have the facility of namespace declaration. This particular namespace declaration will refer the elements and attributes which are used in the XML document. So they are restricted only within that particular scope. And the syntax for creating an XSD is XS is nothing but the prefix colon, schema is my element, XML NS is the attribute for creating a namespace which we saw in our earlier video, colon prefix equivalent to URI. URI is nothing but the location of that particular XSD file that is located, and then we are closing that XML tag. So this is how the syntax for XML schema definition will be. And the example regarding this XSD will be like, since we are using XML version, so we have to specify the XML version 1.0. Under that I'm going to specify XS schema XML NS colon XS. XS is nothing but the prefix for that particular namespace, and you can see the URI here, http www.w3.org 2001 XML schema. So this particular thing is predefined. The W3C consortium has allocated a URI by predefined. So whenever you are using this XSD, you can give this particular URI in order to access it. So what are the various data types present in XSD? In order to use the elements and attributes in XSD, they must be declared with a specific data type. So whatever the variables, attributes, elements that you declare inside the XSD must be declared with a specific data type. So how many data types are available? In XSD, there are only two kinds of data types, the simple data type and the composite data type. Simple data type. This simple data type is used with the basic piece of information such as numbers, text, and etc. So if you want to specify some numbers, some text, you can use directly the simple data type. used with both elements and attributes. So this particular data type can be used with elements as well as attributes. And these data types cannot be used to establish relationships among elements and attributes. So these data types, simple data types, are standalone. They cannot relate with the other elements and attributes. The syntax for this particular simple data type will be like: access is nothing but again the prefix, element name, within the double quotes I'm giving the element name, and the type, within the double quotes I'm giving the element type. Similarly for attribute. So what is this data type? How many data types available? So in XSD, if you want to create a string element or an attribute, you have to use the data type access. Access is nothing but the prefix. It is your wish. You can give any prefix that you prefer, which we saw in our earlier video, namespace. So I gave access colon string in order to create a string data type. Date and time. For date and time, I created access colon date. We have one data type, access colon month, access colon year, access colon time. Likewise, we have the individual data types in order to represent the date and time. The next one is numbers. Numbers are nothing but the decimal parts, integer, floats, and double, as well as the boolean. So whatever data types you use, you must be prefixing it with the namespace prefix. If you don't do that, it will not work. So this is a sample example based on our syntax and the data types. Access is nothing but a prefix. Element name is my student name, that is my element name, and the type is string, since names contains only strings. An attribute name will be here. Element is a tag, name is an attribute. Attribute is a tag, name is an attribute. So please remember that. And then roll number, type is integer. So you can see for element also we can declare a data type, as well as for attribute also we can declare a data type. The next one is complex data types. As the name states, it is built by using the simple data types. When you combine one or more simple data types, it becomes a complex data type. It is used with both the elements and attributes by describing the exact information, just same as simple data types. But here the main thing is we can establish relationships among the different elements and attributes, but in simple data type we cannot do that. And complex data types have the ability to organize element into sequences. So we can order the elements as we have seen in our definition. XSD can be used to order the elements in which order should they occur. Everything we can specify with the help of sequence. And the syntax will be like this. Notice this point. Access element is a tag, name is the attribute, element name I'm giving, consider any element name. Complex type, notice this point, I'm giving as a complex type. So it means a complex data type. Under complex data type, I'm creating one sequence data type. Under one sequence data type, as I declared name is element name type, I can declare. So a complex data type can accommodate many sequential data types. Fine. The more important thing about complex data types is, I said a sequence is nothing but a list of child elements that must appear in order of execution. So sequence, it means when we give the sequence elements inside the complex data types, they execute in certain order. So the number of occurrences of the child elements can be defined. Consider in a particular root element, how many times the child elements must be repeated. In Dtd we saw about the cardinality indicators. One element under one root element, one or more, zero or more. Likewise here, it is very simple. So the programmers need not worry about the codes. Consider there is a attribute known as min occurs. It is nothing but the minimum number of occurrences of the child element. And max occurs is nothing but the maximum number of occurrences of a child element. So in min occurs, if you specify 1, max occurs if you specify undefined, likewise something. So it is understood that the element can be defined any number of times. So to be more precise, the values of the attributes min occurs and max occurs can be in numbers. So consider if you want to specify min occurs as 1, so minimum occurrence 1 must be there, maximum occurrence 5 must be there. So element must repeat the maximum 5 times but minimum at least 1 time. So that you can specify by this min occurs and max occurs. Consider if you want to define infinite number of occurrences of an element. So there is no end for that, no restrictions. So you have to give the value as unbounded. If you give unbounded, any number of time that particular element can be repeated. So there is one more attribute which is known as use. The use attribute, which is used to define whether the value for the attribute is required or optional. For this, in Dtd we had hash implied and hash required. So here it is very simple in English, where you can use this use attribute for any element inside XSD, and you have to give the value required. If you give required, the attribute for that particular element is required, it is mandatory. But if you give the value as optional for this use attribute, it is optional in nature. If you want to give, you can give. So about this, we'll see a sample example so that you'll gain a better understanding. Okay, fine. Now we'll see the program for our XSD. So I already created a program. So you can notice this point, this is a XML schema file, that is XSD. So I'm opening it in Notepad++. So one more file is there, so that is XML file. So two files are opened, one is XSD, the other one is XML. First, to start with, we'll finish this XSD first. As I said, since XSD is a XML based, so you have to use this XML version 1.0 syntax here. And then XS schema is nothing but the tag which you want to create for XSD. XML NS is the attribute, namespace attribute, and the prefix is XS. And the URI which I gave here is the same thing which I gave in the slide. This particular URI identifies the particular schema which is present in this particular URL. The next one, element. If you want to create an element, I'm giving a name for that as college. So college here is my root element. Inside the college root element, I mentioned here as complex type. Why did I mention complex type? The reason is, inside college, I have multiple child elements. If I have multiple child elements, I need to mention complex type. So complex type, inside that I mentioned sequence. Sequence in the sense, so each element inside that particular root element must be occur in a sequence. So what is the sequence there? So inside the sequence, I mentioned name as student. So this is my first child element inside the college root element. And the min occurs, I mentioned as 1. So minimum 1 time the student element must occur. Maximum, it can occur any number of times. So I mentioned here unbounded. So again, I mentioned again complex type. This time why I mentioned complex type? The reason is inside student, I have multiple child elements. So inside college, I had one child element. So I mentioned complex type. Again, inside student, I have multiple child elements. So I mentioned complex type and then sequence. So why I mentioned sequence? Because all these elements will be executed in a sequence. Only after roll number, name will come. Only after name, age, and after age, course will come. And you can notice here roll number, the type is integer. Name, the type is string. Again, the age is type is integer. Course type is string. And you can notice one point here. I mentioned the attribute DOB. DOB is nothing but the date of birth. Date of birth for the student element. The attribute DOB is an attribute for the student element, and the type I gave it as XS date. And use attribute I mentioned here is required. So it is mandatory to provide the date of birth for a student element. Again, I'm closing this complex type element which I created here, then sequence, whatever I opened, I'm closing that. You can notice that. So this is my XSD file, and please try to save with the extension of .xsd. Coming to our XML file, so college is my root element, as I said. Inside college, I declared the XML namespace, and the namespace is nothing but this, which we already seen in our previous slides. And here the main thing, XML access no space schema location. The main meaning of this is, consider many XSD files will be located in a public access specification. It means that it will be located in some remote servers, but in our system it is located in a local drive. So that is the reason I mentioned here no namespace schema location. There is no location for a namespace. That particular namespace, that particular structure is present inside my system itself. That is the reason I provided here no namespace schema location. So this is a keyboard like thing. And for this attribute, I gave the value as myxsd.xsd. This is nothing but my file name. This particular file name I provided there. And inside the college root element, student child element, and the date of birth is an attribute. You can see that. And I gave all the elements. Now I'll try to execute this. For this, you need to download a plugin which is available in the Notepad++. But in Internet Explorer, this particular validation of XSD will not work. That is the reason I'm showing this. So just go to plugins, go to plugin manager, click show plugin manager, and when you come at the bottom, you can see XML tools. Since I already installed, you can see this XML tools will be available, and click install. That's it. Since I already installed, that option is not available. So in plugins, you have this XML tools. Now go to that XML tools and click validate now. When you click validate now, it's saying that XML schema validation is valid. So it is valid according to the structure. Now I mentioned the use attribute as required, right? So I'm removing this date of birth here. We'll see what happens. Again, I'm going to the plugins, XML tools, validate now. So what it says, it's an error. Element student, the attribute DOB is required, but it is missing. So from this you can note that the use attribute works with the help of access specification restriction, where the user has to enter something. Okay, so I hope so you've understood this. So let's get back to the slides. Fine. Our next session will be on XML in-depth part 2. So in this session we learned many things about XSD, namespaces, entities, and attribute values and other things. So it's a very long session. So I hope so you understood this. So let's meet in our next video. Thank you.